welcome to Media Musings to whoever is lurking in the chat and or watching in the future. And so, while today is Super Bowl Sunday, this
what I have to put up with. Not even American, I have to put up with this.
Hey, I probably wouldn't have acknowledged it beyond just wearing the shirt if it weren't for the fact that I learned the cursed knowledge that Ken Ham supports one of the teams playing. So the banner at the bottom will be staying up out of spite until it's replaced, unless it's briefly replaced by another.
You mean we aren't going to have a content warning for innuendo?
Yeah. Okay, hold on.
It is Valentine's Day tomorrow, folks.
Yeah.
So I decided, especially as we'd had
wrong banner. There we go.
We had quite a heavy show last week. I decided we needed a palate cleanser. And I thought, it's Valentine's Day, let's do a rom-com. And I thought, I like seeing my spouse blush. I'm going to make my spouse talk about a movie about sex toys. So this is my Valentine's Day gift to me, basically.
Yeah, basically, unlike last week where the content warning was because it was a movie about a Holocaust, this is a content warning because the movie is about adult fun toys.
Yes, the kind of toys where, you know how that flowchart went around on the internet for a while? Is this toy for a boy or girl? ? The first question was, is this toy played with using your genitals? Yes or no? If yes, this toy is not meant for children. If no, it's meant for anyone.
Yeah.
If we are very much in that it's not meant for children section. Of that flowchart this week, because we're doing Hysteria, starring Hugh Dancy. I didn't get the date of the film. I think it's early 2000s.
Yeah, the script has a very early 2000s feel, but I like how it was filmed as if it were filmed in the 70s.
Yeah, that's just British cinema. That's what British cinemas looked like until really recently.
Yeah.
Especially British period. Yeah. British period drama is very... The BBC has a monopoly on it. And British period drama is very... There's very little camera movement. It's all very contained. And there's not... A lot of British period drama. It's like if you watch Downton Abbey... To me, Downton Abbey doesn't look like a period drama because it's filmed like a modern TV show.
And if okay, hold on. But keep going.
But for an example of what I mean when I say British period drama, if you watch the old BBC Pride and Prejudice, if you watch North and South, they're these very quiet, very reserved shows with a lot of opulence in them, with the ballrooms and everything else, and they are always very beautiful to look at, and there's not a lot of camera movement. And the reason for that is because they're made for an audience. They generally targeted at an older audience, because that's who's into period dramas, unless they're like me and a history nerd. They are not HBO period dramas. There are two kinds of period dramas generally. You've got American period dramas, which are things like Versailles, which are things like kind of the Borgias.
Thank you.
Which are things like Game of Thrones to an extent is a period drama. It's based very heavily on a historical moment. Yeah. But it has that modern I don't know about. I've only seen the first few series. I got bored, but it has that very modern filming style of cameras moving around, a lot of action. It's not very plot driven. Or if anything, it's very plot driven, but it's not character driven. British period dramas are always very character driven. You could film a period drama on a stage. You know,
Yeah.
you could very easily adapt it for a stage, and that's how you can spot a really good British period drama. This one was actually made, I think the director's American, but obviously all the actors are British because you can't fake those accents. You
Yeah.
can't. Trust me, I've seen people try. You cannot fake those accents.
Well, I mean, you've seen me try quite a bit.
Now you sound Canadian.
Yeah.
Quite
See,
a bit. If you try for Jamaican, maybe you'll get Scottish, because it works the other way around.
no,
yeah.
no. See, if I try to go Yorkshire, I go a bit too far north, and I start going Scottish.
You go really Scottish. You go Sean Connery Scottish. Maybe if you try for London, you'll hit Newcastle. I don't know. Like, Ring's accents are a constant source of amusement to me. But anyway, this movie, it's a very bog standard period drama, British period drama. It's got a few of the American touches in there. For example, let me point this out. No matter how progressive the director is, you do not get. The Downton Abbey is the first British period drama I've seen ever do it. Ever outright state that a character is gay. Ever.
Yeah.
It's just not done in British period drama. It's even if it's true, even if that's the part of the story it's just not done. That's the American influence creeping in, because you've got to understand, until the early 2000s, in various guises, it was near illegal to let children know that gay people existed in this country.
Yeah.
Because we had Section 28 and everything else. Speaking of America,
glares
vote down that act.
glares at Texas and Florida.
No, you've got an act going through your government at the moment that's going to, I think it's called the WISE Act.
As far as I'm aware, the actual overt acts were going through state governments, not Congress.
Yeah. Whatever they are, vote them down. You do not want a country that can't talk about things like that. I don't even know how they're going to stand, because they're definitely against the First Amendment. But yeah. I'm not an American constitutional lawyer, but so far as I can tell, most of them breached the First Amendment. But we had that, and period dramas were very much the kind of thing you'd sit down about 6 o'clock at night, after school, after dinner, and the whole family would sit and watch. So to talk about characters being gay, to talk about sex in anything but really, really highbrow, vague terms was a massive no-no. There's a reason most British period dramas end on the kiss. It's because that's as explicit as they're allowed to get. North and South, when it came out, was, because he was this rough and ready northern bloke who ran a couple of factories and had come up from nothing. Even talking about his past as being poor and having to work and everything else, it was weird for a period drama. So, this is not a typical period drama, but it does have a lot of British influence, and you can see it, and some of those accents are very obviously British.
No.
Hugh Dancy, I think Hugh Dancy moved to America in 3 or 4 years ago. If you listen to his accent now, he's got this weird mid-Atlantic accent where occasionally he goes really New York, and then occasionally he sounds like the Queen's brother. And I found it really weird when I heard his accent during lockdown when he did a video. And I'm just I'm crossing all my fingers and toes that after a few years in America, I don't start doing that, because Yorkshire and East Coast, I'm not going to be understood by anyone. But yeah, that's this film is very... To you, it looks like it was filmed in the 70s. That's not the 70s style. That is British period drama style.
Yeah, but here's the thing. I wasn't commenting on the filmography.
What were you commenting on?
I was commenting on the color balance. It looks like it was... Yeah, it looks like it was filmed on the kind of equipment they used in the 70s.
Yeah, it was one of the last movies to be made on film.
Yeah.
That's why it was made on film. It wasn't filmed digitally.
Yeah, it's got that like old school, like, Hollywood musical Technicolor look to it.
Yeah, do you want the technical answer or do you want a slightly dumbed down technical answer? Okay, I'll keep it slightly down because I think you're less technically minded about stuff like that. Digital gives you a very straight up image. It's pixels on a screen. There's a reason if you look at old programs, they've got more of a depth of colour. For example, if you film me with a film camera and 2 shades darker without trying in the same lighting.
Yeah.
Because film cameras, because of the way it processes and everything else, it just draws out more colour from the image.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the technicolor that you're talking about. Digital washes people out. Ring's white, but they're not that white. I promise you. Yeah. Digital washes people out. Especially when you're against the green screen as well, because the green bounces backwards and forwards, it washes people out.
Yeah.
Film doesn't do that. That's what you're seeing. So, and kind of the two go hand in hand. The film style and also the fact that it's on film is very... It does have that 1970s vibe. Although the fact that you think it's 1970s is weird because you're old enough to remember when everything was done on film.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It specifically looked like older Technicolor as opposed to later Technicolor that was still on film.
Yeah, I think that was done though because there's this mentality around period dramas that they have to look very opulent. The purples have to look purple and the reds have to look red. And it has to look very rich and sumptuous. Whenever you see a period drama described as sumptuous, what that basically means is colourful with a lot of velvet and gold. That's what that word means in reviews of period dramas. Sumptuous. It means money no object and they've gone all out on the look.
Yeah.
Doesn't necessarily mean anything about the plot or the story, just how it looks.
Yeah.
And one of the highest praises you can give a period drama is that it looks sumptuous.
Yeah.
If someone said to me, "Oh, a sumptuous period drama," gimme. And don't get me wrong, America has been very good at recreating that look. They do it in Versailles. They do it in in the Borgias. They do it in what's the other one? Mary Queen of Scots. They get the look. I mean, don't get me wrong, they also have a few zips and misplaced Fabergé eggs. But they get the look right, the colours right, they get the colour balance right.
Yeah.
But we're not used to that as modern audiences because we've got so used to digital now that anything with more colour in it looks almost cartoonish, borderline cartoonish, or like CGI almost. So yeah, that's where that comes from. It's just a marker of period dramas. If you watch any others, you'll know. It just has that depth of colour. For those that wear lipstick in the audience, it's the difference between having one layer of lipstick on and having 3 layers on. 1 layer is digital, 3 layers is film. You get that depth and it fills it out more. It's that, or anyone who paints, it's like having multiple layers of paint. It gets rid of the white underneath and it fills the frame and it fills with colour.
Yeah.
That's the technical aspects of this film. which I didn't actually think we'd be talking much about.
Yeah.
What do you know?
Yeah.
Can you tell I've been watching a lot of technical films and stuff recently? Yeah, Krabby's right. Krabby's saying digital lacks that depth.
Yeah.
Because it's the difference between an old photograph and a picture on your phone. It's just flat.
Yeah.
Whereas film's not. I don't know
and
why.
That, that depth, does kind of like put your mind in the set where the most humor are the basic root of this film's humor. It is really going to hit at you, because basically the root of this film's humor, I feel, is the
cognitive dissonance between old-fashioned thing and are they talking about sex?
Well, or the dissonance between our more modern, sensibilities and Victorian England.
Yeah, or what we think of Victorian England.
Yeah.
When I say Victorian England to you, you get this thing of stuffy, straight-laced people in too tight corsets with long faces, and we are not amused. That's Victorian England to a lot of people. Men in stovepipe hats and steam trains going by and workhouses and Oliver Twist and all of that. That's what Victorian England is to a lot of people. It's also bullshit. And this film's really good at peeling back the layers of that.
Well, and also, Puritanism.
Yeah. That Puritanism's expected in Victorian England. Not so much as you'd think. If you think Victorian England, for a long time, Oscar Wilde was out and living in Victorian England openly with his lovers. The only reason he really went to prison is because one of their fathers took umbrage and sued him. No, basically, the father basically called him out. And he sued the father for libel. He sued... Was it Alfred Lord Tennyson? No. I remember the nickname he gave him started with a B. Basically, his little boyfriend's dad didn't like that his son was being led astray by this older man. Called Oscar Wilde out publicly. Oscar Wilde sued him for libel and lost. And because he lost, because the man basically said, he's a, whatever the term was, he's a gay man sleeping with men. It wasn't illegal to be gay. It's never been technically illegal to be gay in the UK. What it's been illegal to do is to practice homosexuality. Now, I know there's going to be a lot of gay men and LGBT folk in general who say, well, I don't practice, I'm very good at it. Unfortunately, that's not a defence under the law, or wasn't at the time.
Yeah.
And kind of Oscar Wilde's entire thing was, you've basically slighted my honour, as if the guy wasn't obvious, I haven't seen a more obvious dandy since before Freddie Mercury. And he lost. And because he lost the case, he then, as part of that case, he'd admitted that there'd been an admission that this stuff went on. Yeah. The country was appalled because we are British and we don't talk about those things.
Yeah.
Therefore, he had to go on trial. And then he got hard labour and he died there. Because he was an upper class, he was a middle to upper class man. He'd never done a hard day's work in his life.
Yeah.
So when he gets 2 years hard labour, he was told, when he went to trial and he was told when he's going to sentencing, if you get hard labour, you're probably not going to survive it. Bosie, that was the boyfriend's name. That's what he called him, Bosie.
Yeah.
And because Bosie wouldn't stand up to his dad, all that started. Victorian England was not as straight-laced as you think. We're talking about the era of Lady Chatterley's lover.
Yeah.
Yeah? It wasn't that... And it's still the same in England today. I don't care what anyone tells you. We will pretend like we are proper. And there will be social conventions.
Yeah.
Because in Britain, there's kind of an understanding of what happens behind closed doors is no one's business but your own. It's when you bring it out into the public when you start having problems. Which sounds, in the context of discussing LGBT stuff, sounds really homophobic. It sounds like don't ask, don't tell. It basically is. But that was the mentality for a long time. And it's taken a lot of kicking and screaming, and at least 2 or 3 generations, before it's become acceptable. The big defence that a lot of people used to say was, I don't care if you're gay, just don't shove it in my face. But what they called don't shove it in my face was don't walk down the street holding your lover's hand. Don't live in the same house together. I don't want to see you going to church together on a Sundays. But it was perfectly normal for straight people to do that, and they couldn't see the disconnect.
Yeah.
And it's taken a long time for that to slowly be eroded. A lot of it's the influence of American media. Because Americans, I'm sorry, but you people have no decorum. And you people have, like, no filter. And it's just, yeah. And that was the whole thing. Everyone, it was understood Oscar Wilde is a confirmed bachelor. If you ever read an old obituary or hear talk of a confirmed bachelor, he was a gay man, but they don't say that because it would be a slight on his honour because gay men aren't, you know, all this.
Yeah.
Therefore, he was a confirmed bachelor. That was fine. Until he fucked a rich man's son and fell in love with him and wouldn't walk away.
Yeah.
That was what was going on there. That was the attitude, and always has been.
Yeah.
Section 28 put that into practice of you're not allowed to talk about homosexuality to children. Which is why in period dramas, British period dramas, you don't see that. It's very, very subtle. Too subtle for a lot of American audiences. American audience and American films are a lot more open about it. So that's how I knew there was an American hand in it straight away.
Yeah.
But I do like this combination of British actors, British story, and just an American hand in there to kind of drag it into the 21st century. Yeah. This film does feel, even though it looks like it's from the 70s, it feels like a 21st century film.
Yeah. Yeah, plot-wise, I'm like, okay, this came out sometime in the 2000s.
Yeah, and this film as well. This film was considered, what's that word we tell politicians when we don't want them to do something? It was courageous.
Yeah.
It took them forever to get funding for this film because none of the filming companies would take it on.
Yeah.
Because they were just like, no, we cannot. This is not a family film. This is not appropriate.
Which is funny because it's like the way it's shot and even the way the script goes, it could be PG.
It is. It is a PG film. I'm pretty sure it's a PG or a 12. And if it's a 12, only just. But it is a very... If you imagine how he behaves at the start of the film. He's very funny about it. He hides behind this veneer of it's scientific, I'm a doctor.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's kind of the attitude that prevails in Britain. Basically, we're a bunch of prudes. There's a reason I want to get out of this country is because I don't fit. You all know I'm not a prude, but compared to Americans, I am. Because I'm British and I can't help it. But yeah. That's kind of the history, cinematography, filmography, historical context. There's one bit of historical context I want to talk about now. That title card.
Yeah.
This film was based on true events. Really. Okay. Based, true, and really are doing a lot of heavy lifting in those sentences. Most of the events in this film, aside from the obvious romantic subplot, because obviously that's an American invention, because can be traced to one person or another. Not all of them can be traced to Granville. Not all of them can be traced to the treatment for hysteria. Not all of them can be traced to the development of the vibrator. Not all of them can be traced to poorhouses in London. But when you put them all together, you can create a coherent storyline and put them all on one person. So take it with a pinch of salt. If you're ever looking, I will flat out say it, if you're ever researching the history of the vibrator, this is not the film to watch.
Yep.
If you're ever looking at the history of hysteria as a medical condition, this is not the film to watch.
Yeah.
It's completely ahistorical in that sense. But you know what? It's a rom-com, it's funny, it's not meant to be historically accurate. If you take this as historically accurate, you're doing something wrong. When it says based on true events, what it's saying is, oh, that thing happened to that guy there, and that happened to that guy there, and that happened to her, and that happened to him, and that happened to her. But, if we take all the things that happened to all these women and put them on one person, and we take all the things that happened to all these men and put them on this person, we can make a rom-com. Yeah. That's what's happened with this film.
Basically, it's less based on true events and more Frankenstein out of true events.
It's a Frankenstein's monster of true events, basically.
Yeah.
Now I've got the mental image of Frankenstein's monster and electricity and how it brings him to life. And talking about that at the same time as vibrators is just... Frankenstein could have gone in a totally different way if she'd have gone the sex toy route. If I have to think it, you have to hear it. Well, those are the rules. So it's a fun yarn. There's obviously a lot of visual gags in this movie. There's also a lot of
God.
Damn it, Micro. Just excuse us while we corpse for a minute.
Oh, God.
I feel like Dr. Frankenstein had some other reasons for building what is essentially a sex doll. I mean, I'm just saying there is probably fan fiction, but I ain't gonna write it, and I sure as hell have never read it.
So that's why I wouldn't.
That might be a good sweet fan.
So that's why I wouldn't build Adam a wife.
There is fanfic. I will bet money there is fanfiction of it. And if there is, good on you, but please tag that shit because I don't want to read it and I want to skip it.
Well,
but yeah.
To finish off this tangent, well, in the book, the only thing creepy about the monster was his eyes.
Yes, but can you imagine in the movie with bolts in the neck and stuff? You could have some serious... No, I'm not going the BDSM route with Frankenstein stuff. Now I'm thinking about all the things you could tell. No. Moving on. Sometimes my brain does things even I can't do it.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is not a historically accurate film. It's not supposed to be. It's a comedy.
Yeah.
It is first and foremost a comedy.
Yeah.
And it's very good because it's a period comedy. Yes, Scummer, there's fan fiction of media musings, but it's of me and Ring and it exists inside my brain. because we are long distance. So yeah.
Well, yeah, because if we weren't long distance, it wouldn't be fan fiction; it would be canon.
That's valid. But yeah, right. So it's not historically accurate. It's a comedy. You're gonna see us corpsing a lot throughout this. You're just gonna have to excuse that. We're live. What can you do?
Yeah.
Right. We get this thing where it opens up and there's this discussion about what hysteria is that's presented to us.
Yeah.
And all these women are crying and bawling and mourning. And it does start off reasonably historically right from a hysteria point of view. Yep. Hysteria was viewed as basically anything that made a woman not obedient cook and mother. And everything's been attributed to hysteria over the years. And it is... There's a lot of history in hysteria. Most of what we think hysteria is comes from Freud.
Freud.
Who obviously is well after this film is based. Yeah. But a lot of his ideas are there. And this film almost takes an affectionate laugh at the men. It kind of takes Freud's theory. Because Freud, first of all, had a theory that hysteria was some... He interviewed a lot of women, and he realised that they all had trauma.
Yeah.
And he realised they all had sexual trauma. Now, Freud was a very proper English gentleman. Well, not English, but you know what I mean. Very proper gentleman. And he couldn't grasp, he couldn't allow himself to believe that of all the women he interviewed, including his own daughter, that they all had sexual trauma in their history. That they'd all been sexually abused or sexually assaulted, etc., etc., etc. He did not want, he could not grasp that men did that in such large numbers. And so he did a complete 180. One of his mates who he was working with actually has been saying since the same period that actually no, that hysteria is the result of trauma. It's a traumatic stress response. For the record, technically I'm medically hysterical. Is someone going to come and take my womb? You can have it. But he went a complete 180 and he turned round and said, men can't possibly be the monsters in this situation. He couldn't grasp that men were monsters. Yeah. Because that's what he viewed it as. And I think any reasonable person, if you put 100 women in a room and 35 of them tell you, yes, I was either sexually assaulted, sexually abused, or otherwise sexually victimized, you're going to look at that and you're going to think, holy shit, men are monsters. If men are doing this to them, men are monsters. That's a natural reaction to have. Freud couldn't handle that, so he went the other way and he turned around and said, if men aren't monsters, women must be demons. Women must want this. Women must, be prostitutes and whores and Liliths and succubi, and they must want this. And their hysteria must be because they're oversexed and all this. Because he didn't want to face the truth in that a large proportion of men are sexually assaulting women on the regular. Not all men, not all the time, but enough that we still, in the mid-2000s, had the Me Too movement.
And it doesn't help that society's basically been set up to let them get away with it for eons.
3,500 years at least.
Yeah.
But yeah, basically, Freud's reaction to those women was the same reaction you see when you get idiots on Twitter who like to have a go at the Me Too movement. Not all men, it can't possibly be.
Yeah.
Women must be asking for it. It's the same arguments he's making that are still being parroted on Twitter to this day and will continue to be parroted for a long time. This film instead takes that argument that women are hysterical because they want decent sex and plays with it a little bit and has a bit of fun with it and basically says, yeah, what they need is a good dicking. But in such a way that it doesn't re-victimise women, and it says it puts the blame for that on their husbands, etc.
Yeah.
For basically thinking that wham bam thank you ma'am will do when it won't. Lots of innuendos in this one, as you expect. For those, does wham bam thank you ma'am translate into American?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's not enough for most women, ergo women go to the doctor with hysteria and the doctor gives them a deep cervical massage. There was a medical theory, a bit of a crackpot theory, that the reason hysteria happened is because women got all excited and it shook their wombs loose and their womb went travelling around their body, and because it interfered with other organs, it drove them hysterical. And by massaging, which is what this is based on, that bit of the history is right. There was a thing where people thought that for a while.
Yeah.
But we're going back like 2,000 years of history for that kind of thing. We're going back to when medicine was the four humours, leeching and bleeding.
Yeah.
And then we've got the use of cervical massage, and I'll say cervical because the other word will probably get this stream cut.
Yeah. Now, so
basically, Scummer has summed up the entire movie there.
Yeah.
Women wouldn't be hysterical if men were capable of giving them a good going over once in a while, basically.
Yeah.
That's the premise. So they go to a doctor who basically gives them the finger for a while until they get off on it, and then they come back the following week for another treatment.
So I will say something about the opening interview section.
Yeah. It does progressively get more and more ridiculous until you realise that these women are just horny. That does happen.
Though, I will say, it sets up a it sets up a great boomerang joke that will come back in like halfway through the movie.
Yeah. It does set up a fantastic boomerang joke, because there's one joke where this Italian woman who very much looks like the opera singer. She's very... Yeah. I'm built big, but she's built bigger.
Yeah. She's built
small.
she's built like the stereotypical opera singer.
Yeah. She's very big. And I'm so sad. This English weather is so terrible. I can't even sing. She says. Because she's so sad, and this is put down to hysteria.
Yeah. And we'll put a pin in that boomerang joke.
Put a pin in that, because then we get the introduction of this. We've met this character played by Hugh Dancy, who's a doctor in the local poorhouse, who's done the latest reading. This is the 1880s. Now, germ theory is from the 1870s. So when he says he's on the cutting edge, the dude is doing his reading. He is doing his reading, and he's keeping up with the latest theories. He's quite obviously poor boy come good, basically. He's got a patron of sorts who's basically funded his education, and he's decided he wants to work for a living, even though he really didn't have to after being adopted by a rich family, which we'll get into.
Yeah, and not only work for a living, but work for a living as a doctor.
Yeah. which, yes, it's a respected profession. Always, everyone needs a doctor. But he's set up in opposition to this other doctor who is very much in the tradition of the barber surgeon.
Yeah.
Who doesn't believe in changing bandages when they get dirty, who believes in these Pinkman's pills. Snake oil pills, basically. Insert reference that you... Homeopathy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, we're going to rewind a little bit because, after the title card...
Yeah.
The first shot is this really well spick and span designed shoe just stepping in horse flop.
Yeah. Which is classic Victorian England.
Yes.
It's classic that undercut of it's basically saying, look, this can be highbrow and posh, but actually it's all bullshit. It's kind of sets you up for the film.
Well,
and I will say,
and we learned that this shoe, belongs to this other doctor.
This other doctor who's just walked into a hospital with horse shit on his shoe, doesn't care, hasn't washed his hands or anything, and starts talking to... there's a whole argy-bargy with these two doctors, the young doctor and the older doctor, one stuck in his ways, one, they're... Essentially, he opens his mouth and he gets fired. Because he turns around and says, I'm not going to stand here and watch you kill your patients. To which the older doctor says, finally, something we agree on. You're fired. You don't have to stand here anymore, basically.
Yeah.
And then we see him go back to his apartment. And this film is very clever because it's one of the few films I've seen where two men live together. One is obviously gay, which it is stated outright. And yet there is no sexual thing between them at all.
Yeah.
They're best friends. They're like brothers. And it's very clever because the comedy of that's very fun as well. Two brothers living together, basically. And you find out that his best friend he's a rich man. And he's very obviously drawn from Oscar Wilde.
Yeah.
He's obsessed with technology, likes to, he always needs the latest generator, electricity, all these things that are modern and new and shiny.
Yeah. Yeah, and so we're introduced to him as Granville is, going, into his apartment, and we've got 4 workmen carrying this big-ass generator that'll barely fit in the door. And when Granville, mentions it to his, brother Fred, he says, yeah, it's half the size and will give twice the power.
Yeah, which is very, I've got the new iPhone, look at me!
Yeah.
Kind of thing going on there. He's that kind of guy. He's a tech bro of the 1800s.
Yeah. But, my
and he's
point
had
is...
a phone fitted, and the only other person with a phone is a lawyer on the other side of London. Yeah. And he's talking to this lawyer who he doesn't know from Adam. And he's just picked up the phone and called, and that's who he got put through to.
But I don't know, that line is just a great bit of physical space here.
It is a great bit of it, especially to a modern audience who expect generators to be about yay big.
Well, it's like, because the one he's getting barely, takes 4 workmen to carry and looks like it'll barely fit through the door.
Yeah, it's come in a giant shipping crate.
Yeah.
Barely fits through the door. Anyone who's ever tried to get a sofa into your front door, you know the trouble. You know the struggle.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's his latest toy. And it is his latest toy. Like, he sits there and he's trying to invent a feather duster. to make the lives of the maids easier. He's never really explained where he got this idea from. He just, yeah. It's basically a drill with some feathers stuck around the bit on the end that he's invented. Yeah. And you see it, but nothing is said much about it at that point.
Yeah.
They have the conversation about the telephone, and you do get the impression he's a rich boy frittering away mummy and daddy's money, probably family money. He doesn't expect to work. He thinks working is very middle class. There's a line where the doctor says, "I have to make my own way in the world." Very admirable.
And how delightfully middle class of you.
Yes, that's delightfully middle class of you. So obviously this friend is the kind of guy who hobnobs with the Queen and what have you. Pinning that too, because that's another bit of a joke. But yeah, that... But yeah. So you've got rich guy who does not work for a living, and his middle class friend who we've learned through the conversation. He's basically, if anyone's ever read The Godfather, the book... In the book of The Godfather, Tom Hagen was living on the streets, Sonny found him and brought him home, and the Godfather basically adopted him as a fourth son. Same story, but upper class England. The doctor's parents died of... No, not typhus, what's the
Cholera.
other one? Cholera, yeah. Because one was the father was like a pastor, a priest, if you like. They volunteered in London when there was a cholera outbreak, both caught it and died, leaving him on his own. So he had nothing. This family basically pulled him out of nothing. He'd have gone to the workhouse if not for this family, is the implication. Which kind of explains a lot about the character. Because the character does have a touch of heart about him. A touch of... You know, he's very much ruled by his heart, not his head. And we find out he's worked in like 8 hospitals in the last year because he keeps getting into arguments with senior doctors about germ theory.
And basically no doctor
his name's
will
Mud in
him.
London. He can't get work. Because no doctor wants an assistant who is mouthy, basically.
Yeah.
It's the same reason I could never join the military. You know, I would get into trouble for not following orders or for arguing back. You know, Ring's a lot more... Well, Ring's capable of keeping their mouth shut. Yeah. So, that's the setup. And he's going round, and he's gone round every doctor in London. He can't get a job. Then there's this last doctor. The Hysteria doctor who only treats upper class women for hysteria.
Yeah.
Who has this very prim and proper English rose of a daughter. Who practices phrenology.
Yeah.
And plays Chopin and reads and keeps the household for her dear papa now mama has died. She's very proper. She's got that going about her.
And
we'll come to that, Krabby. There is a comment you've just passed. We'll come to it. I have a pin in it. To the point where when the father says, "Oh, my daughter's a scientist," he starts reeling off different medical areas. And when he says phrenology, he snorts.
No, see... No, Granville, like... It's very...
It's very subtle. The snide comment. It's very British, the way he does it.
No, so... Yeah, but... The one... All the different ones that are named off.
Are all... Yeah.
You know, geology, finding pretty rocks, botany, flowers, and then finally, lepidoptery, which is collecting butterflies.
Yeah. And he's essentially decided he can't work in the hospitals anymore. He's going to go private practice and, quote, I shall harness myself to some greedy pill pusher, shut my mouth and pray that it nets me a steady income. And his friend's response was, or I could give you £10,000 and you could do whatever you wish.
Yeah.
So that's their thing going on. And then you've got, he walks in and he walks into some woman basically storming out of the doctor's office, calling him a charlatan with no more idea of a woman's wants or needs of the moon than of the moon's atmosphere. And you find out you don't immediately find out who that woman is.
Yeah.
But they agree from watching her shouting at him that she's hysterical. She's a terrible case of hysteria. Yep. And she's basically in this waiting room. She's yelled out. Now, don't forget, this is the 1800s. She's been yelling out in the waiting room about how women should be welcome in the universities, the professions, and in the voting booth.
Yeah.
She's a suffragette. Yes, a lot of the suffragettes were called hysterical and a lot of them were locked up for it. That's a historical point. That's a nasty part of history. Make sure you got a strong stomach if you ever want to Google that. And so he's been to all these different hospitals and he has his interview with this doctor. And this doctor comes out with the most bullshit. Look, we're dealing with a lot of bullshit medicine in this time, but overactive uterus, but in milder manifestations results in nymphomania, frigidity, melancholia, anxiety. There's a reason those things are polar opposites of each other. Nymphomania, frigidity, melancholia, anxiety. Depression and anxiety, basically. It's a catch-all term for any woman who they can't explain. And it is very he's gone for the interview. The doctor says, yes, I'm keen for help. And there's a great line of, not enough hands to do the work, so to speak.
Yeah.
This film is an excellent lesson in always checking the contract before you sign up for employment, and always make sure you find out what the day job actually is.
Yeah.
And
also it's a masterwork in how to innuendo.
Yeah, so there's this great conversation they have where it says, I would be enormously grateful for any position that allowed me to offer relief to my patients with little chance of killing them. And the other doctor responds with, I've treated thousands of cases and I've not lost a single patient. And the doctor offers him £3 a week, which is not... It's good money.
Yeah.
And he... £3 a week? And the doctor, £4 then.
Yeah.
Always haggle for a wage, even if you think you're being offered a good one. The worst they can do is say no and offer you already what they've already offered you. Always haggle. Yeah. So it ends up on £4 a week plus food and lodging. So he gets somewhere to live. He gets 2 meals a day. He gets his breakfast and his evening meal.
Yeah.
Breakfast at 8, dinner at 6, and his own room. So it's a good. That's it. That's a good wage.
Yeah.
And then you have this where he shakes hands and the doctor says, good God, what a grip. And that becomes important.
Yeah.
So he's shown up to his room, and then we meet Emily, which we talked about. Emily very proper, looking after her papa now Mama's gone and all this. And she's utterly convinced that phrenology is an accurate science doctor.
And quite a bit to say about his firm thrombus.
Yeah, so she starts off, you have the most perfectly formed nimbus I've ever felt. He's a man of great wisdom. And she's obviously cold reading him, telling him what he wants to say. And your mastoid is very well pronounced. You're quite sympathetic, aren't you? Well, he's a doctor. I would hope he would be.
Yeah.
So you're not telling us anything we don't know. And then she goes, I'm sorry. Your thrombus is so rigid, so jutting and prominent. Thrombus. It startled me. It augurs fame. And he says, I have no ambition for notoriety. I'm just a doctor. And she's, whether you seek it or not, you're destined for fame. And then we cut back to his friend's house, and his friend's talking on the phone to the lawyer, as we discussed.
Yeah.
The barrister on the other side of London. What did you have to talk about? Nothing. Don't even know the chap. So, yeah. And they're talking about what if there's a phone in every household before long. Imagine if everyone had one.
Which amused me as I was watching it on my phone.
Yes. Yes. Back when phones were such a big thing that no one was sure they'd take off, because will everyone buy one of these? So yeah. And this is all of this is set up, and all I've done is really is talk about the script so far. And then he goes back to his friend's house and he says, I found a job with the leading expert in women's health in London. The friend says, how awful for you. The friend doesn't want to work. And then he says, it's good. And he gets a look, and the way he says it, his friend goes, and who's the woman?
Yeah.
So these two guys clearly know each other. They're best friends. Just to point out, it's quite obvious this script was written by a woman, because I've never known two guys talk like that. Do guys talk like that, generally? You're Ahmab, you answer the question. I don't know if guys talk like that. Like, if you
really think I talk to people?
Someone in the chat answer the question for me, please. Can men tell from whether the other one smiles or not as he's talking, whether there's a bird about? Like, what's the... And he describes her as, I only met her briefly. She's his daughter. She's magnificent. She's the epitome of English virtue and womanliness.
Yeah. I
have no hope, he says. And his friend's like, handsome young doctor, good income. What more could she want? It's like, social equal, But doctor's daughter, they are social equals. He just doesn't think that way. You get the impression that Dance's character doesn't feel like... The class system in Britain was at the time, and still is to an extent, very rigid. What you were born into, you stay regardless. And this was the era when new money was starting to come in for the first time. But new money, there's always the upper classes look down on new money. Because you made your money through business. And that's just indecent and not proper. And that joke, again, another pin in that.
Yeah.
Lots of pins. I need to start making a list.
Yeah.
And so there's this attitude of, he probably thinks because he was poor, because his parents died, that he doesn't deserve a woman of social standing.
Yeah.
I wouldn't dream of dating someone who went to Eton, even if I wasn't married to Ring. Yeah. They wouldn't spit on me in the street. It doesn't matter how good I get, how brilliant I am, how many degrees I get, or what job I have, how much money I have in the bank. I'll always be a common as muck Yorkshire lass. That's who I am to these people.
Yeah.
It's kind of, there's a great, if you can find it, I think it's the Three Stooges, where it's three guys stood in a row, one in a suit, one in a boiler suit, and one in, like, rags or equivalent. And it's, I am lower class, He is working class. I know my place. I am working class. He is middle class. He is lower class. I know my place. And it was a send-up of the British class system, if you can find it. It was a send-up because it's accurate.
Also,
if you want an idea,
apparently
the British class
nobody
system
knows
is Humphrey
Ben.
from Yes Minister. Say that again?
Yeah, apparently nobody knows men.
Nobody knows men. What can we do? But yeah, so and the friend is very passes the comment. Again, film of its time, early 2000s, based in the 1800s. He says better income, social, equal, overrated, his friend says and shrugs. A few laughs, stiff pricks, that's all a woman wants. And you know this because, I've read it in a magazine. So that's the first hint that the friend is not attracted to women.
Yeah.
But reads magazines. And he's a little bit camp. He's played a little bit camp. And so they have this beautiful toast of, to Dr. Mortimer Granville, once a brilliant student, most recently visionary doctor to the poor, now handmaid to anxious middle-aged women.
Yeah.
And he responds with, Edmund St. John Smythe, bachelor, benefactor, miserable student, sometimes drunkard, full-time sexual deviant and supreme waste of time and money, especially if it has anything to do with the science of electricity. And they toast to the telephone, to the Queen, to call in the Queen on the telephone, and they chink. Yeah. So this is their relationship. They're bros, basically.
Yeah.
And it is fun. And now he has to go off and do his job.
Yeah. Doing a lot of manual labor.
Yeah. So, first day on the job, and he's shadowing the doctor. Quite obviously, this is what this is a send-up of, is shadowing the doctor. He goes into an appointment with the doctor, who is going to show him the treatment method. And we have what is both the funniest, the most cringeworthy, but actually a very good how-to on how to finger a woman on screen. So they're talking about this woman. She's laid back up in stirrups and she's got a thing over her for her dignity.
Yeah.
And notice the general pallor. She's pale. She's anxious. She's been having these distracting thoughts all week. And the doctor's talking and he's saying hysterical women have had been offered a battery of treatments over the years: warm baths, ice baths, water jets, memorization, horseback riding. But this doctor favours a more direct approach. So, a little oil on the hands. Keep the hands nice and warm, a little oil. A drop of musk oil, followed by oil of lilies, a good dollop. Now let's see if I can read this with a straight face. Because I don't need to know how many takes it took for that to happen with a straight face.
Yeah.
Now you begin with the index finger, applying gentle pressure and slowly in a circular motion, still pressing gently. It's a bit like tapping your head and rubbing your tummy at the same time, but you certainly get the hang of it. And they start talking about the history of vulva massage.
Yeah. And
again, not historically accurate.
I'm sorry. The fact that emoji came up. Just the timing of that, Gio.
Oh, Gio. But yeah, it's like that joke that went round about how to wash your teacup.
Yeah.
2 fingers round the edge, nice and gentle. Yeah. So mostly prescribed for widows and women of religious orders. No offence to the patient, he says. So good bedside manner, reasonable. And so good steady pressure, that's the key. Reapply oil as needed. And then they start to discuss the effect of the treatment on the patient.
Yeah.
You
And
notice
we're
the shortness of breath,
getting
blushing of the skin, fluttering of the eyelids, twitching, morn crimson, vocalization, all perfectly normal, merely involuntary physiological reaction to the treatment. And then the old woman yells out, "Come on, boy, up and over." And he stood there taking notes.
And meanwhile, there's cuts between the clock, the woman's face, and the two doctors
talking. Yeah. And she finishes the treatment with a resounding cry of "Tally-ho!" because she's British. Which I just thought was the funniest thing. British people don't yell "Tally-ho" when we come. Or at least this one doesn't.
Yeah.
If you've got a horse kink, that's up for you, but no thank you. Steady she goes, Mrs. Parsons. And then he starts talking about, by fierce external stimulation, we elicit the pain-pleasure reaction, inducing hysterical paroxysm, causing the uterus back to its normal position. And then the doctored line that just... As we know, the female organ is incapable of explaining any pleasurable sensation whatsoever. He says while fingering a woman.
Yeah.
Without actual penetration of the male organ. And then those nagging thoughts are gone. And she tries to say he says same time next week. She tries to say same time tomorrow. And she, all things in moderation, Mrs. Parsons. She's a widow, by the way. Yeah, if we didn't say that. And she's got the very dark purple widowy look, very old. She's very Professor McGonagall dressed like Queen Victoria post Prince Albert. That's how she's dressed and how she looks. So yeah, obviously the women know what's going on.
And the chat is...
We knew this was going to happen. We knew it was going to happen. We knew exactly what you were all like. You all know what we're like. We knew this was going to happen. And then he goes to dinner with the doctor and his daughter.
And they're having fish and parsnips.
That's an odd meal. It's a very odd meal. And there's this one bit where she quotes Samuel Smiles. And she says, "Is there anyone more sensible, more supremely British?" And he's quite obviously falling hook, line and sinker for her. Yeah. And then the sister comes barging in. And it turns out the sister is the woman who was yelling at the doctor earlier. There's another sister.
Yeah.
And they are chalk and cheese.
Yeah.
And we learn throughout the...
One's the character Granville is going to start out with, but the other's the one he's going to end up with, because this is a rom-com.
This is a rom-com. And I do love... when we first met her, he literally... he was going to say something to her, he was speechless, and she responded with, "I can see the cogs turning, pity I can't stay for the pronouncement," and then left, which is the best put down wow, that's vicious. Yeah. I wish I could say that's the worst innuendo we're going to discuss on this stream.
Yeah.
But Yeah.
Well, like how, like, so the probably the most subtle innuendo. Well, the most subtle and drawn out innuendo is that the Doctor's family is always eating fish.
Yeah. Always. They always eat fish. And it's always very fresh and flaky.
Yeah.
Look, I know London is on the Thames, but no. It is a very... It's always fish and then something... And parsnips. Which...
On breakfast was fish and eggs.
Yeah. How do you like your fish? How do you like your eggs in the morning? Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of visual innuendo that goes on. So we find out the other sister runs the House of Heaven for the Less Fortunate, the Eastern Settlement. Basically, she runs it's something like a community centre for the poor. There's a school for the children, there's a laundry for the women, they can get a good meal even if they can't pay for it. It's kind of, she's their everything. It's you know, there's somewhere for them she'll help them find somewhere to live. You get to the point where one woman's crying about not being able to pay her bills and she slips her some cash.
Yeah.
She's she's all things to all people. She's Florence Nightingale, but not bitchy.
Yeah.
Because that's Mary Seacole. Mary Seacole, but not black.
White. Yeah.
Yeah.
White Mary Seacole.
Yeah, basically. What Florence Nightingale wishes she was. So, and they end up talking about this woman giving birth to her 8th child, who she's helped deliver. And that's why she's late to supper. And you see this very British thing going on, where she calls it out hard.
Yeah.
So, you know how I said British are prudes?
Yeah.
The proper upright sister doesn't want to talk about childbirth at the dinner table. It's not appropriate, dear. And she's just, childbirth, miracle of life, or dirty, horrible thing not to be discussed over a good meal. While they're eating fish and parsnips, I might add.
Yeah, and, you know, and half the people at the table had spent all day fingering old ladies.
Yeah, basically. She calls out the hypocrisy and you know how I talked about what happens behind closed doors stays behind closed doors? She called that shit out.
Yeah.
She's by far my favourite character in this movie. And I think if you watch this movie and she's not your favourite character, you're watching it wrong.
Yeah.
Well, she is a lot of fun.
Yeah, I mean, she's the character, like, aside from Granville.
She's the main character. She's definitely the main character.
You know, like, the two character, you know, her and Granville are the characters that would, whose sensibilities most align with what a modern audience would have.
Yeah, Granville wants to work for a living. He wants to, you know, be, you know, a good doctor. He believes in germ theory. She's a suffragette and a school teacher and midwife to the poor, and she runs a poorhouse, and, you know, she cares. Yeah. Which does come back to bite her. There's another pin. So, and there's this great line from the doctor in this, from her father, who says, "I've allowed you to roam the streets of London late at night, streets that I would be frightened to go into in broad daylight. I've taken into my own home the employ of an..." And he looks at the maid, an inexperienced maid at your request. The maid's an ex-prostitute.
Yeah.
Ex-prostitute. The word X is doing a lot of heavy lifting there.
Yeah.
Um,
and I love that in a later scene, the hypocrisy of them looking down on sex workers while they're literally being paid to
they
Jill
are
off.
sex workers.
Yeah. It is called out.
Yeah. Very much called out. And then we have the maid follows him back to his room. Follows Granville back to his room. Melville? Granville?
Granville.
I can't call him Granville because every time I call him Granville, I just say, Granville! And I hear Arkwright calling him to open the shop. And I just see a young Del boy on a bike or riding on a cobbled street. I'm British, okay? There are some things that are just stuck in there.
Well, I mean, his first name's Will, I think.
That'll do. We'll call him Will for safety.
Yeah.
Is it Will? Are you sure it's Will?
Yeah.
Cast. Dr. Mortimer Granville.
Mortimer.
Mortimer. So yes, he's a very proper English man with the name Mortimer. Which gives a lot more weight to the comment he passes earlier in the film of there's a reason, it's not a coincidence that the morgues are adjacent to the hospitals.
Yeah.
Granville. Yes, Scummer knows. Scummer gets it. Granville. Yeah, if you ever get chance to watch Open All Hours, the original, not the remake where Granville owns a shop, but the original, it's fantastic.
Yeah.
If you ever hear an English person laugh at the words 4 candles, it's because we've seen Open All Hours. So yeah. And she basically, he says, you know, she introduces herself, I'm the maid, can we be friends? And he thinks this is a normal conversation. Until she says, my friends call me Molly the Lolly.
And she...
Does the word lolly translate to American? Lolly as in lollipop.
Yeah.
As in... what do you call them in America? Do you call them lollipops out there? Suckers?
Suckers. Yeah.
Yeah, which is an even better pun. And when he says that's an unusual name, she says fancy a lick. And excuse me? Fancy a lick. Only 6 bob for a nice man like yourself. Yeah, and he's stuttering and yeah. And he extracts himself very clumsily from her.
Yeah.
And you have to have a dirty mind to enjoy this film. You enjoy this film better if you've got a dirty mind.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely don't feel any shame at getting that joke. And she even says to him, only 6 bob for a gentleman like yourself. It'll only take me a minute. She's very good at her job. Now, I'm looking at a script here and I have to point this out because this drives me crazy. Dear Americans, a bob is not a book. I looked this up to be sure I had it right and wrote it down. Yeah. Okay, so a bob in British English is a shilling. It was 4 florins to a penny, 12 pence to a shilling, 20 shillings to a pound, 21 shillings to a guinea. So a bob and a book are not the same thing.
Yeah.
A shilling, if there's 20 in a pound, so what denomination goes 20 times into a dollar? 5 cents?
Yeah, a nickel.
A nickel. So if you're going to try and Americanize a script and they say bob, you should be replacing that with the word nickel. It doesn't translate. This is pre-decimalization money. There's a pre-decimalisation. We did decimalize in like the late 70s, early 80s. But this is pre-decimalisation money. This money that I've just read out is why the Harry Potter money is so weird, because she was taking the mickey out of it. Although, how could you tell? Because her ability to maths is non-existent.
Hold on.
Yes, channel punching bag.
Yes.
But yeah. So, and he's on £3 a week. So she's basically, he's on £3 a week, that's 60 shillings a week. She's offering him for 6 bob. Yeah. You know,
yeah.
And the father during the conversation does have this discussion about, oh, you know, I'm getting old, I'm looking for a partner in the business. My daughter's very good at running this household, and there's kind of an implied, if you want to date my daughter, you have my blessing going on in the conversation. That happened. And we go into what I've dubbed the courtship montage.
Yeah.
American money's not weird, it just looks odd.
And the well,
walking in the park.
Yeah, it's half courtship montage, half hand workout montage.
Yeah, so he's starting to suffer with his hand. He's got a stress ball, essentially. I have one here. Mine's in the shape of a cat head, don't worry about it. He's got a stress ball. He's going like this a lot. So obviously he's developing carpal tunnel.
Yeah.
That's how we would view it, I think. And he's suffering with it quite clearly in his stress ball. And they're dating, and it gets progressively worse.
And he's dipping his hand in ice water, and he's wearing a wrist guard. Yeah,
there's this great shot where he's holding his hand in ice water to ease the pain in his wrist and his hands, and then he touches the woman and she screams.
Yeah.
And then he tries to use the other hand because his right hand is naffed, basically, and he can't do it, and she leaves in a fit. And he's wearing a hand brace, and we have the courtship montage where he takes the girl out to the park for a walk, and they're looking at the ducks. I knew if I just said it in that tone, I would get that reaction. They're watching the ducks, and it's all nice and pretty and very sweet. And
then the male
one of the ducks mounts the lady duck.
The drake does what drakes do.
Yes.
Yeah.
yes,
Because we all know about how terrible ducks are.
Yeah. And then scene cuts again, and it's following the other sister. And she's at the poorhouse, and she's trying to make money. And we see her, and then he comes out of his house with his friend in the rich area of town where they're living. Or where his friend lives, and he's gone to visit. And he runs face into her.
And she's on a bicycle.
Yeah. And she's not. Is she on a bicycle?
Yeah, she's on a bicycle. She's riding around on a bicycle.
And he lands on top of her, and his hands go to some very unfortunate spots on her body. It's very inappropriate the way he touches her.
It's the accidental groping rom-com scene.
Yeah, so it's, for those who are British, do you remember when Jeremy Corbyn went to high-five someone and missed? It's that, but more. And it is accidental. It is obviously accidental. They've fallen over in the gutter. And we basically find out she's begging for money to keep the place open.
Because her dad wants to discourage her from interacting with the undesirables.
The undesirables, the poor. What was it they call them? The draft horses of London.
Yeah.
The attitudes to the poor are very 1800s. And we find out that she's basically taken a loan from a random Deus loan couple. £200 plus 8% interest. Now today, after 10 years of economic downturn, 8% interest on a loan sounds quite good. Yeah, it's not bad.
Yeah.
That was daylight robbery. And she put up her mother's earrings as collateral on this loan.
Yeah.
And
you get the sense that her mother might have been the one who had started the poorhouse. Or at least later in the movie you get the sense that her mother would have definitely approved of, like, she takes more after her mother.
Yeah, she takes after her mother, very much so.
Yeah.
And there is the comment he passes where I'm sure she would have approved when he finds out what she's done. But again, that's just something British people say.
Yeah.
Like, it's a very... You know how Americans say sorry when you tell them someone died? If you tell someone I've done this with my mother's this, that and the other, I got a tattoo for my mum, I've done this in memory of my mum, our gut instinct is to say, I'm sure she would have approved, I'm sure she would have loved it. So that's kind of what that was geared towards, not this.
So apparently for those of you with VPNs, Hysteria is on Australian Netflix.
Of course it is. Just of course it is. So then she's taken the loan, and then we get him visiting the poorhouse.
Well, no, because first, she shows up at the doctor's
at her father's house with a woman with a broken ankle.
Yeah.
And Mortimer spots her and helps her out and puts this woman's foot in a cast. Because he's a doctor and that's what doctors are supposed to do. And she gets into this bit of a rant with him about... she's basically a socialist.
Yeah.
But she's old school, you know, bread and roses. She's basically Scummer in a dress. That's who she is. Politically, at least.
Yeah.
Which I'm sure Scummer, once he sees this film, will take that compliment. Because it is a compliment. And she brings this woman who's obviously pissed out of her skull. And the best excuse for being drunk I've ever heard. I gave her some rum to help with the pain. Okay, but did you give her rum before or after she broke her ankle?
Yeah.
And the line, the woman's so drunk they're carrying her in, and I'm not wearing any knickers. For the non-Brits out there, knickers are underwear.
Yeah.
And he says, well, that must be nice for you or something. They see her out, and he gets into trouble for helping them.
Yeah.
And then we have the final nail in the coffin, if you like. His hand no longer works at all, and tries with his left hand, it doesn't. It is right-handed.
Yeah, and the opera singer is left dissatisfied.
Very dissatisfied, yeah. I will point out the opera singer calls him Dottore. Slight tangent. Dottore doesn't mean doctor in Italian.
Ah.
Technically, I'm a Dottore in Italian. Anyone with an undergraduate degree is a Dottore in Italian. That's what that means.
Yeah.
That's the title an undergraduate degree confers on you in Italy. The word for a doctor in Italy is medico. So if you're ever in Italy, don't ask for a dottore because you might get a history graduate. Just saying. But she calls him dottore. But he gets dismissed because he can no longer do the job. It goes back to living with his friend. And his friend is still fucking around with his electronics. And he's still, and he's invented basically looks like a hairdryer that you put a dowel in the middle of, and it's got some feathers around it, or a drill with some feathers around the end.
Yeah.
And it's the electric feather duster his friend has come up with. And he picks it up and he's fiddling around with it, and he realises that the vibrations feel quite nice on his hand. For the record, when I first saw this movie, I did not know this movie was a comedy.
Yeah.
I just sat down and started watching it one day. It was this scene where he put the feather duster on his hand and started making those entirely inappropriate noises that I looked at, that I paused it, picked up the DVD and went, is this a comedy? And actually read the back of it. Because I was like, that's weird. Is this a comedy? Because I thought it was a historical drama piece before that point.
Yeah.
And I just thought, yeah, it's Americans. The Americans made it. That's why it's so.
That's why you looked past all the innuendos up to that point.
Yeah, and also because you do expect that level of innuendo in period comedies sometimes, in period dramas, because it's never said outright. So I just looked past all of it. I was like, that's funny, but is it a comedy? Is it? And then I was like, no man makes noises like that. This is a comedy, isn't it? So you have to imagine, picture if you will, Hugh Dancy, the twinkiest twink to ever twink, I should add, especially at this point in his career when he's quite young, in a Victorian gentleman's suit, laid back on a voluptuous velvet sofa, holding the electric feather duster, holding it to his hand and making sounds that would not be out of place being piped through the speakers at a brothel. You know how in casinos they play music and the machines play music that sounds like coins dropping? If they took that concept and applied it to brothels, these sounds are what you would hear. And he realises it on the hand. It feels very nice. And you do get this moment where his friend's like, even his friend's a bit weirded out by him.
Yeah.
And he says, can you turn it up a bit higher? Can you do it? And then his friend stops it and says, you've had enough now. And it's like, no, but please.
Yeah.
And it's obviously a rip-off of the women. Like.
And and they blow the generator.
They blow the generator, yeah. And so there'll be a new one. And then we get the montage of them basically stripping the feathers off it, looking at it, and going, this could work for women. But they have to test it. Yeah.
Because it would be inhumane to use it on patients untested.
Yeah. So what do? They call the prostitute.
Yeah.
And there's the great scene where she says, usually for £5, which is well, if she's charging £6 a blowjob, and there's 20 bob to £1, it's what? Like 20 blowjobs for her? Like that's the kind of money they're paying her.
So, yeah, nearly a half hours of work.
Yeah. So, it's good money. And she even says, for £5 I don't normally ask questions, but that's with a man.
Yeah.
It's a lot of money. If you think the doctor's only on £4 a week.
Yeah.
And if you say his board and lodging's worth another £1, it's probably on the probably it's a week of his wages, and they hand it over. And there's this line where he says yes, but we're gentlemen and we pay up front. So he gives her the £5 and she pays back.
After all the bit about it possibly being revolutionary on the cutting edge of medicine.
Yeah. Really,
But then finally, and we pay up front, and she gets on the bed.
Yeah.
And even then, they cover her up for decorum.
Yeah, they cover her up for decorum. I think they cover her up more for the sensibilities of the poor gay man in the background who doesn't want to look at a woman's private parts than anything else. Because she ain't blushing, and Mortimer clearly ain't either.
Yeah.
And then I've literally written here, called the prostitute to test it. He was on £4 a week, and this is £5. Yeah. And where is it?
And 3 paroxysms in 5 minutes.
Yeah, three if I'm counting right, she says.
Yeah.
And he's, very scientific with his little notebook again.
Yeah.
And we should point out as well, he is very much a man of science.
Yeah.
And he is very much... Because there's even the scene earlier on when he's at the poorhouse and he meets her, and they're discussing germ theory in a classroom. And she says, well, we're teaching it to the kids, and they teach it to their parents. So she's got her head screwed on. She knows how to get ideas out there. And he calls her a socialist, and they have this back and forth, and it's cute, meet cute going on. But then, so they've got it there. She's obviously very satisfied with her £5 and 3 paroxysms. And they take it. You get this scene backwards and forwards where they're discussing. They're discussing names for it.
Yeah.
The rubby nubby, the vibratorium, the jiggly wiggly, the paroxysmator, the sorcerer's apprentice, the excitator, Mr. Wobbleick, the squealer, the electric massage.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they take it to the doctor, and they set it up. And they have the woman who's an opera singer.
Because, because she was so dissatisfied last time.
They'll do it for free if they'll let her test it on her. Yeah, and they talk her into enjoying it. And
we cut back out to the waiting room, and the maid tells the receptionist, you're going to need a bigger appointment.
Yeah. Which is just hilarious.
Yeah.
And then we go back in, and they are setting up. And he tells her, it's a little surprising at first, but don't be alarmed, you'll soon get used to it.
Yeah.
And you get this backwards and forwards of discussions going on in the meantime. Got it in one, Krabby.
Yeah.
Got it in one.
And
she hits the high note.
Yeah.
And they're all very pleased. But there's this great scene where he's holding it, and the 3 of them are stood there. The old man, him, and his mate, who's running the generator. And they all have steampunk goggles, and they pull them down before they do it. And it's like, you're protecting your eyes, and you're putting that wear on her?
and just like the synchronized goggles on
Yeah,
is
like
such a great
synchronized.
sight gag.
Yeah. Mm. And she hits the high note. She starts singing an aria and hits the high note. And it's a resounding success. And you see billboards going up.
Yeah.
And photographs being taken. And all this happening.
And meanwhile, you get a couple of cuts to the friend, tooling away with his Tinker's toys.
Yeah, just fiddling around. And it's so successful that not only does he get his job back with the doctor, he's now engaged to the doctor's daughter, the quiet, nice, demure one, the young lady.
Yeah.
And it's their engagement due. And when I say engagement due, I don't mean half a dozen people down pub, which is how we do it here up north. I mean, it's an engagement soiree for the best and brightest of London, i.e. the richest.
Yeah.
It's held in this sumptuous ballroom. This is your big sumptuous ballroom scene. All the ladies are made up to high heaven with big hair and... Yeah. Nay. I had to.
Well, which is also kind of funny is because an occasion with a horse was briefly mentioned.
Yes, it was. And so they have this engagement due, and everyone around them, and you see the hypocrisy of these people. So the people the other sister's gone to for a loan to don't want to discuss it with her because it's not polite. We don't discuss business in polite company. We don't do business.
Yeah.
And the other sister arrives and she's dressed like a hooker for the time. Dress cuts off, sweetheart neckline, cuts off here. There's no straps at all.
Yeah.
She's not wearing a shawl or anything. And he just looks at her like Thunderbolt.
Yeah.
But there's a great line she comes out with where she says, "You've never seen me so made up." And he responds with, "I was going to say I'd never seen you so clean."
Yeah.
Because she's come to her sister's engagement party, obviously. Then it cuts to the poor house she's left for the night. There's a woman there, and the heavies show up, the bailiffs show up. £200 or we lock the gate. Don't have it, and they give the woman a beating. And it's not pleasant, but it is mostly off screen.
Yeah.
So don't worry about triggers and stuff like that. It's not gratuitous. There's a bit of blood down her face, and she's dirty, is what we see in the next scene. It's very much hinted at, and even to the point at his own engagement party to the demure sister, it's mistaken that he's marrying the other sister by his benefactors.
Though his male benefactor doesn't quite seem to be all there.
Yeah, he's a little bit... He's the doddery old Englishman. That's what's going on there. It's a classic trope. Poor woman comes running in to find, the mistress of the house. They beat me up, they lock the gate, and she flips. I would flip too.
Yeah.
You said bailiffs to my place when the payment was due tomorrow. And she flips, we don't own the note anymore. Now, it's something you have to understand about the way English society worked. You could buy and sell debts, and you still can. If anyone's seen that episode of John Oliver where he buys everyone's debt and writes it off, same deal on a smaller scale. But you have to understand, these people who she owed the debt to, don't forget they charged her interest.
Yeah.
At this time, usury was still illegal in the UK. So it's definitely they're loan sharks. Basically, is what all this boils down to.
Yeah.
And because they wanted her earrings, because they were her mother's, and they're very pretty, and they look like they're diamond or something.
Yeah.
And she loses her shit, and she says, you gave me till tomorrow. What's going on? You get the impression she was going to try and sweet talk Daddy at the party and get him to pay the debt for her.
Yeah.
What you learn is that Daddy's already bought the debt, and he's called it in early, and that's why the bailiffs were at the door, because he's trying to make her stop with this.
Yeah. And he's been trying to make her stop with this throughout the entire film.
Yeah. She's not Daddy's little girl. She's very much the rebellious one. And
she punches.
Someone calls the police because
the police were already there because she broke it, or because the woman busted in.
busted in. And the police try and drag her away, and it's not Emily, is it Charlotte, the other sister's name?
Yeah, Charlotte.
Charlotte, the rough one, the rebellious one. I need to say this in the correct way to give it the gravitas it deserves. She knocks the copper's block off. Straight in the nose.
Yeah.
Like, no hesitation. Like, straight, just, even the camera goes with a fist straight into his face.
And the best friend just, like, right after the punch, the best friend walks in the door. What did I miss?
Yeah. Classic. But now she's punched a copper.
Yeah.
You don't assault a copper. You just don't. That's a surefire way to go to prison.
Yeah.
And we cut to Mortimer sat on this park bench, thinking, playing around with his tie and thinking, and we find out it's the day of her trial.
Yeah.
So British courtrooms very much laid out like this film does. It looks the part. You get the barrister with his nose in the air, very much. He's not. There's a reason the camera focuses on his nose and makes him look hook-nosed as it pulls away. You're not supposed to like this guy. He's an arrogant, ignorant, nasty piece of work. Typical barrister, basically.
Yeah.
And to be a barrister, it's upper class. You're not just a solicitor. You're a barrister. You wear a wig and a robe, and you look the part. And you see this court case going on where he basically... She doesn't get a say. She's defending herself, but she doesn't get a say in the matter. Listen, for the record, the lawyer who defends himself has a fool for a client. Okay? Yeah. Just get a lawyer. She tries to defend herself as best she can. And she's not really getting anywhere.
To be fair, could she have gotten a lawyer?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes. There's an entire TV show called... it actually stars the guy who plays the barrister in this. But he plays a nice barrister who, like... there's a TV show about it. I can't remember the name of it, but it's a good TV show. And she could have found a solicitor or lawyer to defend her. That could have been done. Her father at any point could have put up the money for a solicitor.
Yeah, but her father's banking on Mortimer going with the Hysteria plea.
Yeah, so father wants her to get the Hysteria plea. to put her in a sanatorium because, frankly, he's at his wit's end. He can't control her. She's an embarrassment to him.
Yeah.
And so he's going with the hysteria plea because otherwise she'll go to prison or she'll go hard labour or something like that. But she'll go to a sanatorium, she'll get treatment, and she will be cared for.
And he'll get to forget about her.
Yeah. The royal family have a tradition of putting all their crazes in sanatoriums. You know, they get one every once in a while. It's what happens when you're sowing bread. You know, I think the Queen's sister's in a sanatorium and has been all her life. Is it the Queen's sister or the Queen's aunt or something? I don't give a damn about the royal family. Like, I'm not.
Yeah, you're speaking as if an American would know.
To be fair, Americans are more interested in the British royal family than most Brits.
Okay, you're speaking as if this American would know.
Maybe there are Americans in the chat who know. Again, please. But yeah, so he goes to the court and he's called as an expert witness. Is this a thing that happens in America? Expert witnesses.
Yeah.
Basically, people who know the plea, know what you're going for, and are willing to sell their integrity for a fee to make their expert opinion match whatever it is you want them to say.
That's not exactly
there
how
are legitimate expert witnesses out there.
Yeah.
There are legitimate people who will give a legitimate opinion and won't be swayed by the fee.
Yeah.
I'm not saying there aren't. What I'm saying is, quite clearly what they were expecting was a shill.
Yeah.
And that does happen. That's why you can get a court case where two expert witnesses, you know, supposedly they're experts on this, come to entirely different conclusions.
Yeah.
Because one of them's obviously got a political axe to grind. Or, you know, there's something else going on. And so he stands up in court and he starts being asked these questions. And the barrister basically gets what he wants out of him and shuts him down. A classic heroic move in a rom-com, he decides he's going to say his piece.
Yeah.
And I do love how he does it, because he starts talking about how she's passionate and she's fiery and she's loud and all this.
Yeah.
But she's not hysterical. And he basically parrots what she's been saying to him throughout the entire film to the court. He says, I believe hysteria is a nonsense. It's a word men use for women they can't control, or for women they don't know what to do with. And the thing is, I don't know how it is in America. In Britain, when something is said in court, it is submitted to the court records.
Yeah.
And court records are how precedent gets set. But they are also a permanent record. Anything you say in court, it goes onto a permanent record. That's why there's a typewriter in the corner. A person taking notes in the corner.
Yeah.
Same happens in Parliament. Anything that gets said in Parliament, unless it's struck from the record, goes on record. Now, you've heard some of the bullshit that gets said in Parliament. So can you imagine people reading that in 100 years?
Half the Tories opposite are crooks.
Please retract that statement. Okay, half the Tories opposite aren't crooks. Exactly. That someone had to type that into the notes, and it will be in a permanent record somewhere.
Yeah.
If you want more great one-liners like that, go Google Dennis Skinner, YouTube. And the Beast of Bolsover, love that guy. And they have this conversation, and the judge hears him out. And the line he comes out with is, yes, she's fiery, she's passionate, and I'm not saying all women should be like her, but the world needs women, the world needs a Charlotte Dalrymple. I'm not saying all women should be like her, which is a good thing because they broke the mould. I don't know if this idiom translates internationally. When you talk about they broke the mold when they made that person, they broke the mold when they made that man, they broke the mold when they made that woman, what they mean is this person is exceptional.
Yeah.
This person is someone, and it's very funny because you'll, especially up here up north, you'll hear it said as they were the salt of the earth, they were a good person, they broke the mold when they made that one.
Yeah.
And it's one of the greatest compliments you can give someone. Here, I don't know about anywhere else, but here it's one of the greatest compliments you can give someone. Basically what they're saying is, you make a difference. Even though you think your life is small and insignificant, you have made a difference to my life. That's what you're saying when you tell someone they broke the mold.
Yeah.
It's something that's quite, it's said about people when they die. They broke the mold when they made that one.
Yeah.
And it's one of the few things that's said around death and when people die that's not a platitude. If it's said, it's because it's true.
Yeah.
Or at least in my case it is. I don't say it unless I mean it. They broke the mold when they made that one. If you imagine... Let's imagine we're not on an atheist channel for a moment. If you imagine somewhere there's a conveyor belt of human beings being made in, like, God's workshop. If God's Santa and his little elves are there making people. And they're dropping mud into the clay and it's drying out and they're taking it out and one at a time and putting them on the conveyor belt. Like making dolls in a factory or something. And then they make one, but they don't make it using the mould. They throw the mould away. And they put that person in the lab because that person is something special. They broke the mould when they made that one.
Yeah.
That's what that means. Or at least that's the mental image I get. That's kind of... It's probably not the origin of the term, but... And then the judge gives his pronouncement. He can't set a precedent because she's lamped a copper.
Yeah.
See how northern I am there? She's lamped a copper. But he says, we can't keep locking up women in whom whimsy and logic collide. Which is a beautiful, beautiful line. It's absolutely beautiful. It's the idea that she's got this whimsy and this faith in the future and in humanity. But she's also blindingly clever. Like, she is... She goes toe-to-toe with him on germ theory, socialism, politics, education, and she never is once wrong in this film.
Yeah.
Like, from a factual standpoint, the things she says are never wrong. So she's not just book smart, she's street smart as well. She's got that nice balance. And the great line from the judge is, including my wife.
Yeah.
And that's important because the judge's words, again, go on the record, but it's basically saying we've spent X thousands of years ignoring women, and this is the judge saying, actually, all women are like her, really. Women are clever, women are capable. That's what he's getting at there. That's what that means. That's why you get the rousing music in the background, because that's the moment of a judge under law recognising that women are capable of being intelligent, being political and all this. He says it in a courtroom again. And it's basically the first step to set the precedent of women, of hysteria isn't a thing.
Yeah.
Which is important. That's why you get the rousing music there. But he sends her down for 30 days. She does 30 days of porridge for decking the copper. Great moment. Yeah. They're taking her down. And he runs up to see her and he's, and she tells him, they have their conversation. And he says to her, will you be okay in prison? Great line.
Yeah.
I'll be fine. I've got lots of friends in prison.
And there's also the line of, now I owe you my uterus.
Yeah, because the barrister was pushing to have her admitted to a sanatorium, but also surgically sterilised and her womb removed. Because this was the extreme treatment for hysteria. You know, it can't get up and walk around her body if it's not in her body.
Yeah.
So yeah. And then we go back to the park bench with her and the young sister. And it's an amicable breakup.
Yeah.
It has to be because it's a rom-com. And they realise that they're just not made for each other. She wants to go live her life because she's learned from her sister now that she's basically just been daddy's little girl. And she wants to do something.
Yeah, and she admits that phrenology
is bullshit.
Yeah.
And she decides she's gonna, do her bit. And so they part amicably. They're very friendly. It has to be in a rom-com, hasn't it? Because otherwise she'd be the spurned lover and marrying a sister. He'd be a bad guy if she didn't want to do the breakup as well. So classic trope there. 30 days. And...
Well, no. Then he goes back to his friend's flat.
Yeah.
And his friend hands him an envelope
of money. Yeah. And what's this? This is your royalties from our sale of... Not from the original vibrator that he took to the doctor, but his friend's been tinkering in the background and has made a miniature one. A handheld one, basically. What we would recognise as a vibrator. It's completely ahistorical, but it's fun, so let's go with it.
Yeah.
And we get the impression it's several £1,000s. Because what he does, out of that money, if you think about it, he goes to meet her when she comes out of prison.
Yeah.
And he brings her a gift because it's Christmas Eve. Snow's falling in London. It's very sweet, very romantic. You know how it's going to go.
Yeah.
And he hands her this big brown box and he says, I thought you'd like this. She opens it and it's
he says, it's a Christmas present. I know it's early, but I figured you'd need it.
Yeah. And it's a coat with a fur collar. It looks mink, although it's probably fake because, let's be honest, this is a film. And it's velvet and it's very nice. And then he hands her the envelope.
Yeah.
Does he hand her the envelope first? He does, doesn't he?
No, he hands her the envelope second.
No, after the coat.
Yeah.
After the coat, yeah. He hands her the envelope and he says, you once said that with £2,000 you could change the world.
Yeah.
Which she did earlier in the film. And she looks at him like, are you off your trolley? Because he's basically decided he's going to fund her running this poor people's place. There's 2 buildings next door that are for sale that she could buy and create a proper community centre for the poor to help people, to get them educated. She's already running a laundry and a school. She wants to do more. Yeah? And they have this little backwards and forwards where he offers to... Basically, this amount of money his friend handed him and the royalties from this item, he doesn't have to work. That's what's basically being said here. He doesn't have to work anymore.
Yeah.
Because the joke is, he says to her, she says, well, I could use a doctor. And he says, does it pay? And she says, nothing at all. And he agrees to it.
Yeah.
And then you get, and he says, oh, look in the coat pocket. And he pulls out the little box.
Well, no, yeah, he doesn't agree to it. He says, I was thinking more of a partnership.
Yeah, a partnership of equals, he says. A partnership of equals.
And then he tells her to look in the coat pocket.
Yeah, she takes it down and it's a box. And she looks at him like, she literally reacts kind of how I reacted when you proposed to me. She's like, are you stupid or what? And she's just like, because she's dead set against marriage. She wants to be a free woman and do her own thing. Yeah. And he takes the ring off and gets down on one knee and says, don't make me beg, it's cold. It's snowing, it's cold. Will you marry me? And she says yes. No, she says, I'll have to kiss you first. Which is very risky for this era the film's based in. And they kiss, and he says, how did I do? She says, you'll get better. You'll improve.
And you've got this, one... They're still at the gates of the prison. You've got this prison guard just standing there the entire time. Yeah,
just stood there, like, kind of... I think he's supposed to be a beefeater, but he's a prison guard.
Yeah.
So he wouldn't be a beefeater, because they guard the royal palaces, not the prisons.
Yeah.
So it's probably, like, and... Then the film ends.
Well, so...
Because we get an end credit scene or a mid credit scene.
Well, no, so then it cuts to spring.
Yeah.
The older, the doctor, her father, and the old widow.
Mrs. Parsons, yes.
Yeah.
Who wanted an appointment tomorrow, not next week, remember?
Yeah.
Are taking a walk in a park and watching the ducks.
Yeah.
And then it just cuts.
Yeah.
You see their faces, he says, oh, the ducks, lovely. And you just see their faces, their smiles become very fixed. Because the Drake's doing what Drakes do. Yeah. And then it just cuts. It's a beautiful, Credits start rolling. And then we get this end credit scene, which is just fantastic. We get Emily, the good little daughter, first of all.
Well, no, first we see gloved hands and red sleeves getting a box.
Yeah. Then it cuts to Emily sneaking downstairs by candlelight or sneaking somewhere by candlelight in a nightdress.
Yeah.
And then we see... and the box is quite clearly in the flat that belongs to his friend, and that's taken away. And then we find Emily trying the electro-vibratorium thingy.
Yeah.
And it's... We follow the box, and it's almost like watching The Budget, where you follow the box to the Houses of Parliament. And it's taken through all these old ornate buildings.
Yeah.
We should say as well, his friend, there is a bit in the film where his friend is on the phone talking to the Queen. At one point in the film.
I thought...
Because he calls her mom. And then puts the phone down.
Oh,
who is laughing and joking.
I thought he was saying mom.
No, mom. He calls her mom.
So I thought he was talking to his mother.
No, he was talking to the Queen. That's the joke. That he was talking to the Queen. Do you get it now?
Yeah.
He was talking to the Queen. And so...
No, well,
this box is...
It's funny either way, because he says, no, I won't give you one, not even for Christmas. You'll have to buy one like everyone else.
Yeah, that's what he says. So she sends someone to buy one from him, presumably, and it's put in the box. And it's this ornate wooden box with, like, red velvet interior. It's quite clearly for some... You know well before it arrives where it's going that it's for the Queen.
Yeah.
Because it's just that he's in the royal household. It's the uniform, it's the box, it's the white gloves, the whole shebang.
And the box is sealed the entire time.
Yeah, and it's taken into the room to the Queen.
And we get like the one shot that tells you that this is like aside from the, this is the one shot that cinematographically tells you that this is a modern film.
Yeah, no, but first of all, you walk in and the Queen's sat there, and it's a very traditional look for Queen Victoria. It's how we all imagine her. She's wearing all black. She's sat at a table. There's a fire on the other side, and she's sat in a chair, and he brings this box and he places it in her hands. And she opens it.
And we get...
And you see her facial expression first.
No, also, this is why I say that that this shot, or that this particular shot is how you cinematographically know that it's a modern movie, because it's a reference. Yeah, because there's light coming from the inside of the box, a la
Pulp Fiction and
Pulp
the
Fiction.
briefcase.
Yeah.
It's the Pulp Fiction briefcase moment.
Yeah.
You see her expression, and then the camera cuts down to what she's looking at in the box.
A Jolly
and
Molly.
It looks like a hairdryer. It does look like a hairdryer. It's got a little wire on it, and it's in this box. And it's the Jolly Molly.
Yeah.
Which I just think is fantastic.
Yeah.
And then the film just ends.
The film ends with it cutting out to an exterior of the palace while playing Rule Britannia.
Playing Rule Britannia, and you just see the lights flickering.
Yeah.
So the Queen's having a good night, folks.
Yeah.
She's having her first good night since poor dear Albert was put in the ground.
Yeah.
And then you get this final flashcard of Hysteria was officially removed from diagnosis in 1952. And yeah. And that's the end of the film. So this is a comedy.
Yeah.
It's obviously got very modern sensibilities. This is a film that I don't think you could have made much more than 20 years ago. And it's only a 15-year-old film-ish. So it's progressive for the time it was released in. It's definitely progressive for the story it's telling. But it is also very much of its time.
And I don't think it would have been made any earlier than...
You could not have made this pre-Obama.
Yeah.
You just couldn't have made this pre-Obama. If only because of the gag about his best mate being gay.
Yeah.
You couldn't have made that. The best mate's facial expressions make the movie, though.
Yeah. Because
the best mate's facial expressions are just spot on. I love it. And you couldn't have made it pre-Obama because there just wasn't the open sexual. I mean, you could have done, but it would have been a ha giggle. It would have been quite snide, the response. This film was made in 2011. You probably couldn't have made it post-Obama either, especially for an American audience, because doesn't it feel weird to know that we had a moment in history of just sexuality liberation before everything came slamming back down? I talked about this last week. 2 steps forward, 1 step back. We're in the step back phase. So it's very much of its time. It's that 2008 to 2016 era.
Yeah.
Where everyone was very open about sex and sexuality, and we were at the height of the Me Too movement, and we were at the height of gay marriage is legal in America, and, you know, Michelle Obama is, was she Time Person of the Year? I know she got a Time front page at some point.
Yeah.
You know, that... I don't think we realised how lucky we were in that era.
It's like, ooh, things are going progressive, they're going progressive, and then 4 years of backlash, followed by a couple...
No, we're still in the backlash.
We're in... Well, okay, nationally, we're in the backlash being halted and held still by...
Not from the outside, you're not.
Yeah.
Obviously, when Ring says nationally, they mean America, because America is the only country to Americans.
No, I mean nationally, as in solely nationally and not on a state level. Because on the state level, the backlash is still going hard.
Yeah, backlash is still going hard.
Yeah, when I'm talking nationally, I'm talking federally.
You're talking United States nationally.
Yeah, United States federally.
Yeah. Very similar thing happening in the UK. This is definitely a pre-Foster Setzer film. I think Foster and Setzer is really what destroyed a lot of sexuality discourse on the internet. This is pre-Tumblr porn ban. Yeah. So it was that nice era in there. We had a few years where we were allowed to be LGBT, not repressed, sexually aware, sexually confident, and to talk about it. And I don't think we realised what we had. Or that there was a time limit on it. I like this film. I think it's a great comedy. There's some really nice jokes in there. I like that the comedy is done in a progressive manner. I like that it takes a mentality that a lot of people still have. You know, it's the calm down dear mentality. And rips it to shreds.
Yeah.
It's obviously had the hand of a woman in there. Like, when I found out the director and writer was a woman, I wasn't surprised.
Yeah.
Good film. Comedy. Not a historical document.
Yeah.
I don't want to see anyone ever talking about this film and taking it as historical fact, because it's not. It's an idea.
Like, the closest you could say is it's a satire of our idea of what the Victorian era was like.
Yeah, and I think this film is very satirical.
Yeah.
This is more than just a straight-up comedy. It is a satire.
Yeah.
Which is probably why I watched the first half of it and didn't realise it was a comedy.
Yeah, which is, once again, coming along with our theme of, like, the first movie we talk about in a genre is also a satire.
Why? What film are we doing next week?
No, I'm just saying it seems to be a going trend, because the first superhero movie we talked about was Deadpool. Yeah,
this is the first rom-com we've done, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. See, this is the problem. When you do streams with AMAB people, there's only so many rom-coms you're allowed to watch. You're allowed to do, which is annoying. But yeah, it's a good popcorn movie. If you're gonna, like, I say popcorn movie, but if you try and eat popcorn or drink while you're watching it, you'll choke, because it is funny. It is very funny. For me, the satire is very good, but there's a lot of different levels of satire going on in this film.
Yeah.
You've got the straight up, haha, look, horny women, which, yeah. Look, sex is funny, it sells.
Yeah.
Yeah. You've got the straight man in The Doctor who thinks that this is all medical science. Oh, for the record, if the Doctor was so convinced that his work was all medical and professional and scientific, why didn't he have his daughter in for treatment? No, I don't want to think about that either, but they knew. It's basically, it's a subtle way of saying they fucking well knew and they didn't want to admit it. I like how it takes a very damaging idea Freud had. The psychology is a profession, and the medical professions and everything else are still recovering from that bullshit Freud peddled. And they turn it into a joke, which is what it is and what it should remain. Yeah. And anyone who knows anything about psychology knows Freud was a bit of a joke.
And you know, Freud, sometimes a fish is just a fish.
Yes, sometimes a fish is just a fish, even when it's flaky and fresh and served with parsnip.
Yeah.
Yeah, safety first. Wash your hands when you're finished. Wash your hands between patients. But yeah, great movie. I enjoy it. It's a fun thing to point out the satirical moments and the jokes.
Yeah.
And not a historical document. What else do I have to say about this movie? I do like Molly. I think Molly's really fun.
Yeah.
She's obviously the comic relief character. It's what I like about it is it has all the trappings of a serious period drama, or serious as an American-made period drama gets.
Yeah.
And it does it in such a way where I will admit I'm oblivious to comedy and stuff, but I'm oblivious because I have a diagnosis for that. I'm dyspraxic. I don't notice social cues all that well. So you can kind of hand wave a lot of the satire. But do you know what? I've studied this, so don't argue with me because this is an academic opinion. The best satire is the satire you don't notice until it's too late.
Yeah.
And this is a great satire in that regard. It is very good.
Yeah.
And for presenting an idea and for reaching an audience that wouldn't normally interact with these ideas and these concepts of women's lib and feminism and progression and everything else and sexual liberation, it's a great film. I do not ever want to see anyone quoting it like it's a history book, because it's not. But it's a great film and a great entry. You'll find that the Wikipedia article on Mortimer Granville is quite short, so maybe look elsewhere if you're researching him, because he didn't really do much except invent this thing, and he never ever used it in the treatment of hysteria. There's no record of him using it in the treatment of hysteria.
Yeah.
Well, no reliable record. That's an utter fiction, but it's fun and it's funny, so I can forgive this movie a lot because of that. If it tried to present itself as a serious period drama and tried to show this as a serious period piece, I'd be more pissed off at the historical inaccuracies.
Yeah.
But it's not. It's not trying to be Pride and Prejudice. It's not trying to be an Austen movie. It's not trying to be North and South. It's not. That's not what it's for. It's first and foremost a comedy, and it's fun and it's funny.
Yeah.
And you know what? Look at Ring. Ring is tall, dark, and handsome. I have a type. It's a good eye candy movie as well. I'll admit it. You know, Ring's not quite as twinky as Hugh Dancy, but you know, take what you can get. It's a good movie. I can't knock it.
Yeah.
I like when I'm down and I know I need a giggle, this is the movie I put on. You know, it's just fun and it's funny. Even the commentary around being LGBT, minor though it is in this movie, and it is very minor.
Yeah.
Even that's done with an air of affection and love, and there's no shit. The beautiful thing I love about this film is, even though it is fundamentally about women being shamed for their sexual needs and women being shamed for having a voice and thinking for themselves, this movie never ever mocks or shames the characters.
Yeah.
When it's to do with their sexual liberation, their sexuality, and their politics. It never mocks and shames anyone. Except the old man. But that's because he's stuck in the past, and that's kind of what he's there for.
Yeah.
He's the plot foil to that idea. if you want to explain to your teenage daughter, like, what's going on with puberty, there are worse films you could show her, and, you know, just... I wouldn't watch this with a teenager because all you'd hear is, ew, 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 cringe. Because I know that's how I'd have reacted as a teenager. I would not have wanted to watch this movie with my parents, but it is a good comedy. And especially given the highly sexual content of it, it's just good, clean fun.
Yeah.
This movie, we were saying before we went live, this movie could have been a PG rating. I think it's a 12 for mentions of sex and sexuality, obviously.
Yeah.
But this movie could easily be a PG.
Yeah.
The most violent part in it is her decking a copper, which, right on, girl.
Yeah, it's like, and yeah, it's like all the sexual stuff going on in the movie is all hidden under layers of innuendo, and like,
yes, it's all very innuendo.
Like, the most sexually explicit things in the movie are shots of the
doctors stood with their hand under a thing, just,
well, I was gonna say shots of the patients' faces as they're getting treated.
Yeah, and it's all done through insinuation and innuendo. Yeah. So I would say this is a film that's safe for teenagers to watch. I wouldn't... You know, if I knew someone who had a 10, 11-year-old, I'd be saying, have the conversation with them about sexuality and sex and make sure they understand that, you know, this is a private thing. But I wouldn't have any problem with... If someone said to me, I've got an 11-year-old daughter... and I don't want her to be ashamed of her body, I'd say, yeah, show her this.
I've watched PG-13 movies with more explicit visuals.
Yeah. Quite clearly it was rated by someone who's never actually seen it.
Yeah.
You know, I would... This is a very good way of discussing sex in a light-hearted, fun way. Like I said, I would show it to a teenager, even a preteen, who's, you know, getting to that age where you start to expect rotten socks under the bed and... yeah, please teach them to be clean and to like tissues and things. But yeah, if they're getting to that age where those things are... You're starting to think those things are going to happen, it's a good film for them to see. Gives them a laugh, gives them a giggle, and hopefully it teaches them not to be ashamed. Because that's the best thing about this film.
Yeah.
If the Queen of England can do it, and then there is no shame, is there? And Queen Victoria as well, who is like historically the biggest prude who ever lived. You know, that's my takeaway from it. I would... It's a great film for opening conversations about shame and how we shouldn't be ashamed. Obviously, that doesn't mean, you know, wave your vibrator around in public. But have these conversations if you're watching it with a young kid, but I don't see any reason not to. Most of the jokes, if they're under about 13, 14, are going to go straight over their head anyway. And if they're not 16 or over, they're going to pretend the jokes go over their head because they don't want you to talk to them about it as their parent.
Yeah.
That's how that's going to happen. Like, the number of times I used to watch films with my parents and just pretend I didn't know what was actually happening because I did not want that conversation.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So I went to go check and see if... Because it might be enlightening to see what Plugged In might have to say about it, but there's no reviews on their website for it.
Yeah.
Plugged In, it being the online review service run by Focus on the Family.
I would pay money. I would pay literal money to watch people who would ask Focus on the Family for their opinion on a movie watching this movie. That's the next season of Gogglebox. That is the next season of Gogglebox. We film your mother watching this movie. Oh, sorry, I killed my spouse.
Flail dead. I am dead. I am dead.
We get, like, you know, those to give people in Britain an idea of why we find that so funny. Ring's mother is very Christian. So imagine if you showed this movie to Hyacinth Bucket.
Well, first off, it's pronounced bouquet.
I showed them a lot of British comedy when they were over here. But Ring, you've watched British comedy.
Yeah.
You've watched with me, you sat and you've watched Keeping Up Appearances, you've watched Hello Hello, you really enjoyed that. You've watched Only Fools and Horses with me, I think.
Actually,
Bits and pieces.
We haven't gotten around to that.
No, I left Only Fools and Horses because it's 9 series is long and I wanted to, like, binge it with you. You've watched bits of Open All Hours with me, with the shopkeeper, with the store,
Yeah.
Do you think this movie is any more explicit than any of those shows?
No.
Right. There's your level, folks. Yeah, I mean, to be fair, Amiga, if your option is a purple dildo or a gun, please with the purple dildo. But otherwise, maybe keep it at home in your bedroom drawer. Yeah. Great movie. Obviously, you've seen Us Corpse a couple of times. It's one of those rare movies that can both be described as good, clean fun, and also just is pure innuendo.
Yeah.
Pure innuendo.
So it's the dirtiest movie that's good, clean fun.
That sounds like an innuendo.
Like, it's the dirtiest good, clean fun movie.
I tell you what, I can summarize this movie with one meme. Let me find the meme. Come on. I'm going to share a screen. If you want a summary of this movie, this is it.
Hold on.
Come on, beyond that. That's this movie. Yeah, everything's just about the phrasing.
Yeah.
So that's my summary. I think it's the Archer meme. I think should have been made for this movie.
Yeah. Yeah. Just hysteria in a nutshell.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
What do you think now? What's your summary?
I think that pretty much covers it. Though the duck scenes are a lot funnier if you know what ducks are like.
Yeah. I mean, it's quite obvious what they're doing because one literally mounts the other.
Yeah.
And then you've got the scene from the woman come on duck up and over, which is hilariously British. She's just hilariously British. I love her.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just... Do you know what this is? You know how we were talking the other week about family movies, the difference between a family movie and a children's movie?
Yeah.
This is a family movie. Like, this is a movie that the sex jokes go over the kids' heads and the adults get a good laugh. But it's almost the inverse of what we think of as a family movie.
Yeah.
So a family movie is a movie that's mainly aimed at kids but has jokes for the adults. This is a movie that is mainly aimed at adults but also has some jokes for the kids.
Yeah.
So yeah, I still feel like it should technically fall under that umbrella, except that would be outside of what we generally understand to be.
So basically it's like if Horseshoe Theory were actually a thing, this is the Horseshoe Theory family movie.
Yeah. Like, it's so... Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, not a film I would say don't let a kid watch, just, you know, conversations to happen. I think it would be a great jumping off point for a conversation to be had with a young teenager about sex and sexuality. To break the ice, because it's a fucking awkward conversation, let's be straight here. It's an awkward conversation. I say let's be straight like there's anyone straight on this stream. We need Scummer. Where's our token straight guy gone? Yeah. And it's an adult comedy for adults, but I see no danger in showing a child it. They're not going to understand it, and if they do, you can use it as a stepping point for a lot of good conversations about how we shouldn't be ashamed and how this is normal and natural. And we joke about it because in the olden days they were ashamed and when they shouldn't have been. You can have that conversation and make it age appropriate. I promise you, if you've got a 12-year-old, they already know. Yeah. They just do playground banter. They've heard worse in the playground.
Unless they grew up like me.
How much of what went on in the playground where you lived went over your head, though? How much of it did you miss because you had your head in a book?
Well, remember, my playground was in a church school.
Yes, I went to Catholic school. But I promise you, by 9 years old, I'd have got most of the jokes in this movie. Yes. Mummy, why did the lady say tally-ho? Is the chat just now going to keep quoting this and making jokes so we keep corpsing? Is that what's going to happen?
So I think that's a good excuse to move on to shilling.
Yeah. I don't have anything to shill. I never do. You know this by now.
Yeah. So, me and Brainbug might have gotten wires crossed a little bit. So, I was like, I had asked them if the 20th was good, which of course is next Sunday, because I was thinking of doing my part of our discussion on Starship Troopers as another episode of Media Musings. If you saw yesterday's Live from the Hive, obviously they're under the impression that it'll be on the 19th. Either way, next weekend, Brainbug will be on this channel, and we will be discussing Starship Troopers, the book.
You're giving me a week to read a book.
Sometime after which, I will be appearing on their channel to discuss other Starship Troopers stuff. Now, so here's the thing. So next week is possibly Starship Troopers, but I may have to come up with another topic depending on how the wires get uncrossed.
Yeah. I'm not sure what's going on with crabby right now, but I'm concerned. Let us know if you're all right.
Yeah.
Because we can see the chat and we can see what you're saying. So
Yeah.
I hope everyone's okay, whatever's going on there. Oh, and speaking of innuendos, are we going to go on to taglines?
Yeah.
You know my tagline's an innuendo.
Yeah. So yeah, let's go on to taglines then.
Take care, be good, and if you can't be good, be careful.
And remember, the purpose of a storyteller is not to tell you how to think, but to give you questions to think on. Too often, we forget that. And also, go Rams, make Ken Ham cry.
I don't speak American.